We're going to explore some of these things a little more. I've got a few questions to ask, and I'm sure there are others here who might like to do likewise. And firstly, a question for Peter when he's got his glass of water. And I guess, like many, looking at the ACCC, one does see a reasonably active enforcement profile. And what occurs to us, though, is that it's somewhat opaque. Just what are the matters that are most likely to engage the enforcement action of the ACCC and what's not? You've been reasonably active in the last year or more in a lot of areas in telecommunications, but then some others seem mysteriously not to receive that sort of treatment. So I guess when we see the third set of soft warnings to the broadband companies about their statements of broadband speeds and things in 3 years, 3 warnings in 3 years pointing to real gulf there, we wonder why something like that didn't get a stronger response, or why the list of practices that you described in that collective enforceable undertaking, which all seem to be just straight out vanilla deception, why the Commission would have thought to pursue it in that way rather than another way. And it's just to see if we can get a bit of an insight into how that might work and how we might be able to link a little more clearly into that. I wonder if you'd care to respond to that.
Thank you, Alan. Look, there are a number of sort of issues you've raised there. One, I suppose the first one goes to how do we make decisions, what sort of criteria do we apply to choosing enforcement matters, and when we take on enforcement matters. Well, a lot of the issues that we take into account, I think, are ones that have been there for a long period of time, and ones that we apply more generally. Is it conduct that is clearly affecting a large number of consumers? Is it conduct that, if you like, is more likely to be national in scope as distinct from, say, a particular regional or state matter that a state-based fair trading agency might deal with? Is it conduct that might have a particular impact on more vulnerable consumers? Is it conduct that appears to be persistent or to have happened over a period of time rather than just a one-off? These are all the sorts of issues that we take into account because, as you can well imagine, we get far more matters brought to our attention than we can deal with. I mean, Chris pointed to an issue as well here that, in relation to your comments about warnings, that we will seek wherever possible to encourage industry participants to address problematic conduct voluntarily. It might be through codes, it might be through improving their own internal compliance within a firm. And if that can be achieved, then that often can deal with the problem more directly, more efficiently. But where that clearly isn't generating the right sort of outcomes for consumers, then the ACCC is more likely to act. It doesn't. The number of complaints will often be an indicator for us, but that doesn't have to be the case. And I think there's one recent example that I mentioned that's a good indicator of several of the issues that I've talked about. Our action in relation to international phone cards, where we actually didn't receive, hardly any complaints, so less than a handful of complaints about the marketing around those phone cards. And I think one of the key reasons for that is because those cards, more often than not, are aimed at non-English speakers, perhaps overseas students, recent migrants, people who are less likely to complain to regulators like the ACCC, people who are less likely to understand consumer protection rights within Australia. But when we looked at the nature of the complaints that were, nature of the representations that were being made to consumers, the extent of the advertising, the fact that you had this dynamic in the industry where different companies seemed to be almost outbidding each other in a race to the bottom. So when you've got that sort of market dynamic occurring as well, the ACCC is more likely to step in. And we did in that case. We decided that we'd take on several of the major issuers of international phone cards and that it warranted court action rather than just obtaining an 87B undertaking because of the nature of the representations and the consumers that had been affected. And that was, if you like, an interesting example of looking at a matter affecting vulnerable consumers, repeat players, an industry where you had a dynamic that was producing poor outcomes, but not necessarily a large number of complaints. So these, in other words, matters can bubble up to become frontline enforcement matters through a variety of mechanisms. In terms of the speeds issue, well, I mean that is one of the matters that is covered in our recent multi-organisation enforceable undertaking. But look, we have invited comments from industry and consumer organisations on our recent guidelines in this area. We've received some fairly vigorous comments back from ACCAN, which is good, including vigorous public comments, and that's helping to, I think, send a clear signal to us that we need to consider how we are prioritising that issue. That sort of feedback is useful, and further information on that and the sort of problems that you're seeing is very useful on that issue. So we've deliberately asked for that sort of input, and I think it's terrific to have an organisation like ACCAN providing that. So let's see what else we get on that. We have no doubt that will. It's not going away. You're right. So maybe it is something we need to look at more closely.
A quick follow-up on that, Peter. The pace of things is something that often frustrates consumers, and there are obviously due process elements to investigations, particularly if something's going to go to court, and hence I think we can readily accept that if you can negotiate a deal with somebody that puts things right and provides refunds straight away against what might be a very long run and uncertain litigation, that there's a really interesting trade-off to be made there. But do you feel that consumers generally have a sense of the priorities and how decisions are made at the ACCC? And if not, how can we, as part of this building a new mode of communication, make some steps in that?